hmm to one, give Bianca a big win, and this way, like, you can obviously then this match isn't just a repeat of what happened last month, and two, you might be able to have the time to build up a better ending that actually kind of teases more dissension, have more opponent miscommunication between Sasha and Bianca and whatnot to really, go into that thing of like, ooh, we don't trust each other.
Right.
Yeah, even on top of that, when Sasha starts getting upset with Bianca about, oh, you're a rookie, you can't do nothing, stay out of my way. When she gets rolled up and loses, why is Bianca still jumping in and trying to break the pinfall? Bianca should have said, fuck you, and laughed in her face for getting pinned.
I agree.
And then on top of that, there's no pull apart brawl or nothing after she gets slapped. This was a SmackDown segment that should have happened closer to the Royal Rumble as opposed to closer to WrestleMania.
100% agree with that. Yes, absolutely. And my issue with this is, and Mike, you kind of talked about it when we were talking about the kickoff, is that Ali and Riddle should have had this spot because it would have been a more interesting angle. And it was a more interesting angle, and it was on the kickoff, and less people saw that than they saw this. And my other thing with that is that I don't want people to think that I'm saying take the women's match off of the show. It shouldn't be on the main card. No, I'm actually saying the opposite about that. I'm mad, and believe me, I don't want to go into a whole rant, but I might just have to. And it's with every wrestling show, it seems, unless your name is NXT, is that you have one women's match, you have one women's angle, you have one women's feud, and yet with every other show, every other wrestling show, or every wrestling show, there's like 8 to 6 men's matches, men's feuds, if not more, that didn't even make the show. But this is really the only women's feud we have in WWE right now. In the main roster, there are 3 main belts in WWE's main roster: the women's SmackDown, the women's Raw, and the women's tag. They can't think of 3 angles, at least 3 angles to go with them. I understand Asuka broke her teeth and they got kicked out of her mouth by Shayna. That's a written angle you have right there. Asuka returned last Raw. They made this match last 2 SmackDowns ago, 3 days before that Raw happened, and you couldn't even make a match between Shayna and Asuka to go on Fast Lane. Instead, you wasted it on a Raw in 3 different segments that just ended it dead right there. It doesn't make any sense to me. And then you had this whole Sasha and Bianca feud. AJ, you brought it up earlier. They should have had this angle start so much closer to the Royal Rumble. They shouldn't have been a tag team. It feels like such lazy booking to put them in a tag team, go all the way up to Mania, and then finally at the last pay-per-view before Mania, we only have 3 weeks left. You find out that, now they're starting to hate each other, when the only feud up until then was them and Reginald and Nia and Shayna, who should have been doing stuff with Naomi and Lana, with Mandy Rose and Dana Brooke. I know those aren't the best tag teams.
Let's pump the brakes on getting Mandy Rose and Dana Brooke involved. We don't need to watch them.
Yeah. But then you have the whole thing like, okay, maybe they could have gone to NXT for the tag titles. Wait, no, they have NXT women's tag titles. When you have so few women's tag teams, let's just throw a wrench into everything. Let's make the women's division in WWE absolutely horse you know what. I can't stand it how they treat their women's division. I can't stand how a lot of wrestling companies treat their women's division. AEW isn't a saint, even though they just had a women's main event. They aren't a saint. They're not proven yet. They might have had one good deed, but every company seems to do the same thing with their women. They use them as an attraction, or they use them as a one-act show, and then we go to the rest of the show with all the men's matches. You had a month after Elimination Chamber to make something with Asuka, Sasha, Bianca, Nia Jax, and Shayna Baszler. Not to mention, not all women's matches not all women's feuds have to surround the title. You have no originality in the women's division. It's all lazy booking. It's all repetitive, and none of it makes sense, at least on the main roster. And I'm just sick and tired of seeing it. And it makes me sad to think that everyone says, well, the women's evolution saved women's wrestling. No, because the bookers still look at women as the one-act show for their card, nothing else. And I'm sorry for going on such a big rant here, but like it's embarrassing. It really is, because women's wrestling, the women's division should be on the same level as the men's division. But it's never going to be if you're just going to give them one match on the main card, one feud for the entire build to WrestleMania. It doesn't make any sense. You have 3 women's titles. You can't make a feud for just one. You have to diverse the feuds. You have to make it for the women's division to mix up with the men's division, to make it actually equal. You need to give time and effort equally to both divisions. And stop me if you think I'm going too far, but yeah, that's the end of the rant. That's the end of the rant.
I mean, yeah, you see it in freaking NXT. Like there's a reason it's considered pretty much the best women's division that any company has ever had, really. Mm-hmm. You know, they treat that's really the only title. That's really the only show that has 2 separate, you know, women's and men's divisions that it really does feel like the women's title is on equal footing with their world title in terms of importance. And I mean, constantly, you'll see them have more than one feud at a time. I mean, we saw it earlier, like not even a few months ago. We saw it with Shotzi, Candice, Dakota, and Rhea, and then the women's title feud with Io and Candice. Well, not Io and
Tony.
Io and Tony, Io, Dakota, as she went through her different challengers. And, you know, honestly, what's weird to me is that the NXT women's division they introduced the tag titles, and it just feels like they already have a deeper division than what's happening on both Raw and SmackDown. And so, you know, it's not like there's just less talent there. You know, they have some of the best women's wrestlers in the world. I mean, they have Bayley on SmackDown, and she's currently just hosting a show.
Yeah.
And even then, that's just from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, it's not through lack of talent. It's the same thing we've been saying about AEW. It's not from a lack of talent. It's from a lack of care. And, you know, like you said, there's been some unfortunate injuries with the Asuka thing, and you know, just all that. I understand that can throw a wrench, but it doesn't seem like there was much to even throw a wrench in, quite frankly.
Yeah, she hasn't competed in the past 3 pay-per-views. She's been fully healthy, and yet, even on Raw, you might say they have a bad division, or not a full division. You have people like Peyton Royce, who not only was getting a lot of fire and steam off of her Raw Talk interview, you got people like Naomi. You got people like Rhea Ripley's coming. You couldn't have fastened that up to make some sort of feud. There's available people on Raw that aren't in tag teams and that could use the effort of a push, the effort of booking, the effort of being on Raw in more than 5-minute segments. It feels like the same thing over and over again. The women are the bathroom break, not because of the quality of the wrestling, but the quality of the booking. Why would I give interest to something that they're not going to care about? It's just the same thing over and over again. And you bring up NXT. I can name you feuds in NXT with women that weren't contested for the title. And I feel like that's more important. Mm-hmm. Dakota Kai and Tegan Knox was one of my favorite feuds of the year. And it wasn't for a title. It was for the story element of it. That's what I care about. You know, the title is supposed to increase the story. That's what everyone says the title's for. Well, how is the title going to increase anything if there's no story? How am I going to become invested in Sasha and Bianca? Because it's going to be a good match? I'm sure it is. But you can't rely everything on a match. A match can happen, and it could be horrible. It could be the best thing they've ever seen. The same thing we saw of FTR and the Young Bucks. If the FTR and the Young Bucks didn't have a great match, that feud would have been the worst feud of the year. But it's looked at as a fantastic feud, but a fantastic rivalry because of how good the match was. But if you had two lesser tag teams, you weren't going to get the same result. That's the same thing with every booking decision, every story, every feud. And unfortunately, the women's division only gets a story and a feud. No S at the end of those words. It's only a story and a feud every month. And at WrestleMania, we're probably just going to get 2 women's matches for both titles. I doubt we're going to see the women's tag titles defended. And unfortunately for those women's tag titles in the same right, they're just props in this Sasha and Bianca storyline that's too lazy to think of something original or unique to make this feud original or unique or something to care about.